Ever wonder how schools and culture drifted so far from biblical truth? Well, today you're going to hear how God is using Corey Miller's story to bring truth and reason back into the education and culture. You've spent years leading Ratio Christi, equipping students to defend their faith on college campuses, and that's amazing work that you're doing right there. So, what first opened your eyes to how education in America was drifting away from its Christian roots?
I think when I was a youth pastor, youth and college pastor in the Pacific Northwest, I grew up as a Mormon, seventh generation in Salt Lake City, Utah. My ancestor was a bodyguard of Joseph Smith. That led me out of, eventually, I got to a Christian camp. I became a Christian. I wanted to go into ministry, felt God calling me. Did that for a while, went into pastoral ministry, but I started seeing my students going off to what I call the secular baptismal font, the university, and they would come back on Christmas break with their brains hanging out. We try to push it back in. They go back again. They come back next time and they say, Mom, Dad, I learned two things growing up, Santa on one knee and God on the other. The first one I figured out on my own, but the second one I had to hear from all the smart people, the PhDs. I'll be home for Christmas again, but Christmas will never be the same again. That's the
Mm,
message they were sending. And I looked at the secular university as highly influential. And I thought, like the city of Troy and the Trojan horse, they tried to broach the walls for a decade unsuccessfully. And they figured out a stealth plan to get in from the inside of a horse, stealth in a stealth fashion, and then
mhm.
invade the castle. And I thought if I can go into a secular university, get a PhD from their areas, then I could go in and defend our own and advance the cause of Christ. I tried that about 20 years ago, got to Purdue University, and I started seeing within 6 weeks I'm getting prank calls at 3 o'clock in the morning mocking me for my faith. By the fifth year, I had my PhD pulled from me, saying that I had too much of a faith perspective. I had to terminate with a 5 year master's degree. That launched me into going after professors. I really saw where the gold was at the end of the rainbow. If you can get the professor, you get their classroom too for 30 years. I continued to teach philosophy and comparative religions for about a dozen years in total at Indiana University, while working on a PhD for a second time at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, and leading a faculty ministry that I was part of with Campus Crusade at the time at Purdue. As soon as I finished my PhD, 2 months later, Ratio Christi called me, and I've been their president for the last 10 years.
Hmm. Well, Ratio Christi, what is that?
It's the name on my shirt. It means the reason of Christ, and our Venn diagram represents apologetics and evangelism, and the sweet spot is both. We tell our people we have two ears and one mouth for a reason so that we listen more. If someone needs a hug, we give them a hug, but if they need an argument, we are the ministry on the campus that gives an argument. So, what separates us from every other apologetics or defender of the faith kind of ministry out there is
Mm.
that we are on the college campus, the most influential institution shaping civilization. What separates us from every other campus ministry to give us our own unique lane is that we do apologetics evangelism. We're the only ones that do that. So all the campus ministries have their own idiosyncrasies, their own strengths. Same with the apologetics ministries on the outside and the churches. But we've got this unique lane of doing apologetics evangelism, confronting the big topics. And so our mission is equipping students and professors to give historical, philosophical, and scientific reasons for following Jesus. And our vision is thoughtful Christianity, transforming lives on campus today, changing culture tomorrow. As goes the university, so goes the culture. And as goes the US university, so goes the world. This is literally ground zero to leverage the entire world. A lot of people don't realize how significant this is. One in three world leaders, a president, prime minister, dictator, whatever, one in three out of 180 plus countries got an academic degree from a US university. This is the place of influence. It is the place where our doctors, our lawyers, our media, our politicians, our K through 12 educators, even going back into Christian schools, are all coming from. It's the place where the future professors are born. If you want to change the culture, change the university. Politics, I often say, is downstream from culture, culture from education, and the apex of education is the university. If you want to change the culture, change the university. So, Nancy, we're about, by God's grace, saving souls on the university campus, but we also want to save the soul of the university. And so we have a high school division, we have a college age division, and we have a professor's division. And more importantly, for the future, we have a PhD student only division that is clandestine in its operations. We don't give the name of what it's called because we are funding PhD students to launch PhD student only ministries on the top 100 colleges so that in 40 or 50 years, we are aiming to take back significant ground and have salt and light on the universities on the inside.
Hmm. So now, how does this compare to Charlie Kirk's ministry of Turning Point USA?
Yeah, Turning Point USA is not a religious organization. A lot of people are confused about that. Just before he got shot and killed, he addressed the trans question. Just before that, he addressed the Mormon question. He was in Utah, Utah Valley University, a university I've lectured on, and a university where we have a chapter there, and our chapter director, his daughters, and our chapter was there 20 yards away when Charlie got shot and killed. Um, his that organization is a 501(c)(3), but it's about limited government, free speech, free market economics. TPUSA Faith, by contrast, is about the American Pastors Project, uniting people around core Christian doctrine and removing woke from the pulpit. Those are distinct but tied in. We are a Christian campus ministry that is Jesus centric, that is giving apologetics or reasons for why we ought to be conservative, why we ought to be Christian, why we think God exists in Christ and revolutionized the West, which is now best. So we're giving the undergirding reasons for why there ought to be a conservative movement at all. What is it that we are conserving and why? So we
Hmm.
provide the philosophical underground. Now, I've worked alongside Turning Point. Their national director of TPUSA Faith, Lucas Miles, has endorsed my book, The Progressive Miseducation of America, subtitle Confronting the Cultural Revolution from the Classroom to Your Community. So he's endorsed my book. I did a TPUSA event 2 weeks ago, an Ask Me Anything event with Megan Basham. And in about a week, I will be at another university. I go to University of Houston this weekend. Next weekend and week, I'll be at University of North Carolina, and our group there is partnering with TPUSA to again discuss the progressive miseducation of America and is Christianity good or bad for the world? And so there's a lot of people within TPUSA who aren't Christian. When Charlie addressed the Mormon question, he said half my staff, and he meant his senior staff, are Mormon. Now, I'm former Mormon. I don't think Mormons are Christians. I think Mormon individuals might be, but Mormonism certainly is not. They're a conservative movement. And so there's an opportunity to reach inside and see souls come to Christ that are conservative, but the why of their conservatism still needs to be answered. And this goes back to the biblical justification that God exists. We have rights that are endowed by our Creator that are inalienable. Government can't take them away because it never gave them. And moreover, why should we care about free speech rather than cancel culture? And that is because human beings are made in God's image, Genesis 1:26 through 28. The world doesn't believe that, or they have no grounds for that. We embrace the sanctity of human life because we have a sanctifier of human life. But if there is no sanctifier of human life, if God is dead, then everything is permissible. And that's why you're finding this assassination culture on campuses now, where 56% of those who self-identify as left, which is typically where more atheists and agnostics vote, they think it's justifiable to assassinate President Trump, or 51 to 52% think it's fine to assassinate Elon Musk. That doesn't come from a biblical worldview. That comes from a secular worldview. So why should we not have an assassination culture? Why should Black lives or all lives matter? Not because we're on the Serengeti and we're in the jungle ethic, but because we were created in God's image. So the Christian worldview needs to be again showcased in the universities, of course, in the churches and in the homes, as not only good for the world, not just good for going to heaven, but also reasonable and true. And then in my book, The Progressive Miseducation of America, I lay out, a clarion call to pastors, to grandparents and parents, to professors and educators, parachurches, uh, political allies, and prayers and donors. All hands on deck. It's the university, stupid. Even if you're not called to go back in, everyone needs to pay attention to the poisonous ideology coming out because it's coming into our homes, into our churches, and even into our closets. We can't hide anymore. Nancy, I think a lot of people don't realize what we're up against. The ratio of left to right among professors in the 90s was 2.3 to 1. That's still severe, but there's still checks and balances with that. But now it's 12 to 1 for those who are retiring, 23 to 1 who just got their tenure and have another 30 years ahead of them, 27 to 1 at the Ivy Leagues. And if you're going to a place like Yale in their humanities and social sciences, the place of the presidents and SCOTUS judges, it's 78 to 1. What pastors, what parents are preparing their kids for that? Literally, parents and grandparents are paying for the apostasy of their own children.
Thank God for people like you who are going in there and you're helping people and equipping them to go into these universities. So, how do you think universities have become and why do you think they've become so hostile towards Christianity?
So in the book, I lay it out in three parts. The first part is this is no longer grandma's America. How did we lose the culture or losing it because it's not over yet?
Hmm.
I say look no further than the universities. And the natural question is, wait a minute, didn't we start those? Yes, way back from Europe with Cambridge and Oxford and so forth. But in America, shortly after the Pilgrims landed and had their Thanksgiving turkey, they went and launched Harvard University with the motto Truth for Christ and the Church, which lasted nearly 300 years. By 1840, every single university president was also a member of the clergy, teaching the senior capstone class on moral philosophy. By 1880, church and chapel attendance were still required. There was a battle that took place between 1880 and 1930. We had no PhD programs in America, so we sent our best and brightest overseas to typically Germany, which is the most educated, formally educated country in the history of the world at the time. And that's where people like Immanuel Kant, we remember him because he was the end of the Enlightenment period. You can't know ultimate reality, right? Agnosticism. And you had people like Schleiermacher, the father of modern liberal theology. The people that Dietrich Bonhoeffer were fighting against, actually. You had Freud and sexuality that we see in the sexual revolution and part of the revolution we're experiencing today. You had Nietzsche, God is dead. You had Hegel, Marx, Engels, and this is a Marxist revolution. Well, all those graduates had come back and they ushered in the worldview of scientific naturalism on the campuses. That every department started to change its name from politics, a subset of ethics, to political science, from psychology, which literally means the study of the soul, to now the study of the brain and central nervous system, the Department of Psychological Sciences. Everything was about science as the be all end all of knowledge. You have to taste it, touch it, smell it, hear it, feel it for it to be real. If not, just go in your closet and have wish fulfillment. And so that impacted the church by giving us liberal Protestant theology and the social gospel. Well, in the 1930s, the dust was settling. They won. We had to go start our new universities like Westminster and Calvin College and Wheaton and Biola, all of which are now sensing cracks in their fissures as well. Because right in the 1930s, when the dust was settling, something else nefarious was now just beginning in Germany. In Germany, there was this new group of Marxists, the neo Marxists, and they were trying to figure out why their father, Karl, his predictions didn't come true and what happened. And they thought, okay, we need to expand the horizon beyond just class warfare of haves and have nots and the redistribution of economic wealth. Instead, to expand it to race, class, sex, gender, ethnicity, nationality, and so forth. And they also incorporated with Marx and Freud together so that you had this neo-Marxism that included sexuality and so forth. Well, they were socialists, but they were global socialists, not national socialists. The anti-fascists and the fascists didn't like each other. Antifa and the Stalinists didn't like each other. Hitler and Marx didn't like each other. And so in 1933, because most of its founders were actually Jewish, atheist Marxists, this little mustache guy rose to power. They had to get out of town. Where did they go? Columbia University, Brandeis University, UCLA, and they started infiltrating our top universities. And then you had within the same Axis power set of Marxists, we usually think Axis power Nazis or fascists. The Antifa members, the anti-fascists. Down in Italy, you had Antonio Gramsci. Well, who was he? He was one of the most dangerous of the neo-Marxists or cultural Marxists. And he never got out of prison. So how did his views get mediated to us in the English world? Well, right here in Indiana at Notre Dame University, a Marxist professor by the name of Joseph Buttigieg, father of Mayor Pete, mediated his writings into the English-speaking world. And then within 15 years of that time, you had the founders of French postmodern thinking, Foucault and Derrida, deconstructionism, and Lyotard, all of them in France. You might look at that as like the Vichy government or something. Those people were also card-carrying members of the French Communist Party. So all these peoples are commies. They're not Nazis. They're not fascists. They're Marxists. They're globalist socialists, not national socialists. And you're looking at this amalgam of a postmodern cultural Marxism. And all of their teachers came over to America's top universities, taught in them, took us through the 60s revolution. They had an impact on the sexual part of the revolution. The race part, they didn't quite win. Martin Luther King held them back because he was concerned about the content of the character and not the skin pigment. But eventually they thought, the old guard, the workers of the world unite, the factory workers on the floor that were supposed to rise up in revolution, that old guard needs to become something new. It needs to become academia. And now we need to think about the long march through the institutions. And so the cultural Marxists set out on this long march to ensconce themselves into the soft tissue of culture, which included academia, media, and ecclesia, church. Once they ensconced themselves to such a degree in those areas, then the political society of law enforcement, military, and government will just topple. That's what they've been doing. They're now not just in government. 66% of Democrats now self identify, as of last week's statistics, as socialists. 15 years ago, it was only 50%. And you're finding many in the Democratic leadership who are presidential candidates or billionaires like Elon Musk, lifetime Democrats. They're all now in the Republican Party, and this is part of the revolution. We've got Bruce Jenner or Caitlyn Jenner in that party running, who ran for governor and is going to again, I think, of California. This is a revolution taking place. This is no longer, the Democratic Party is no more. It's Marxist now, and you're looking at Mamdani taking over in New York City. You've got someone in Maine. You've got politicians, multiples of them, talking about assassination of their political opponents. And look, they've tried to assassinate their political opponents. And we have an assassination culture, which is not fringe. 56% of those claiming to be on the left think that it's justifiable to do so. This is where we're at today.
Mm. So much information and a lot to digest, a lot to think about.
Yep.
I'm very grateful that you're doing what you do because you're enlightening. I'm learning so much from you right now. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. So
Thank you.
yeah, and so how can Christians stay firm when the culture keeps changing the rules?
Yeah, there's a sense in which we need to be disciples of Jesus, and that sounds cliche. And come on, give me some more information. Mark Knoll wrote the book 30 years ago, I think this month, The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind. And the scandal, he writes in the first line, is that there's not much of an evangelical mind. As the atheist Bertrand Russell once quipped, most Christians would rather die than think. In fact, they do.
Hmm.
Ouch, that hurts. But this is what has happened. The movement, the Jesus movement, where Jesus said to know God is the purpose of human life, John 17:3. Knowledge is not a peripheral aspect of Christianity. It is central to our experience. But we think of ourselves as a faith tradition, not a knowledge tradition. We are not a faith tradition. We are a knowledge tradition. And we need to understand that. And Jesus commanded us, not invited us, to love God with our minds, not just with our heart and our hands, but with our head. And 1 Peter 3:15 says, "Be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason, for the hope that's in us, and do it with gentleness and respect." There you have the fully orbed Christian, the head, the heart, and the hands. But Christendom in America 100 years ago abdicated its role and responsibility in high culture. We excommunicated the mind. We want to just feel Jesus at a passion concert or a worship set on Sunday. Or we want to just have the hands of Christ and provide the food pantries. But we don't want the head of Christ. This is the movement that started the universities. Why? Because we begin with mind and not matter. It makes sense why the universities started with us. We are the movement that started the hospitals in the fourth century. Why? Why not the atheists? Why not the Muslims? Why not the Chinese? Because we have the Jesus figure, and followers follow throughout history those who are serious. We have the free market economics and capitalism that started from Adam Smith, the father of modern capitalism, that got half the people in the world out of poverty because of it. We have a checks and balances kind of government. Why? Because we realize that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we need to have representatives who represent us, but who are virtuous and knowledgeable people. But now that has changed. Our government has been taken over by secularists who have no Christian ethic. Harvard, which was once about truth for Christ and the church, now just last month hired their first drag queen faculty member to teach classes on drag. And we are having not just Bible or drag queen story hours. We actually have churches now that are literally having drag queen Bible story hours. So, in my book, The Progressive Miseducation of America, I need people to pick this up, not just so I can make a buck. I'm not trying to do it for that. I need people to read this or listen to it on Audible. The first third is how we lost the country. The second third is how we lost the universities, explaining how we lost the country. And the last third is the solution. We need to be able to be disciples, follow Jesus' command, follow Peter's command, not invitation, love God with our minds, put on our thinking cap. We need to show that Christianity is good for the world, it's reasonable, it's true. And then a clarion call. Pastors, stop getting us into gimmicks of skinny jeans and fog machines on Sunday mornings. Stop getting us influenced more by culture and sociology than by scripture and theology. Get back to the scriptures, Ephesians 4:11 and 12, equipping the saints for ministry. Parents, I know it's hard, whether because of feminism, ideology, whether of the standard of living, whether because it's now almost a need because we've created a economic situation where both parents need to work. Whatever the case is, they both work, they're tired, they're exhausted, and what we've often done is we've punted our responsibility over our children to the youth pastor, whose statistics about adhering to a biblical worldview are much worse than senior pastors, which right now, according to the recent stats, is 51 to 57%. We
Mm.
are in a very bad position to send our kids off to a university where the average professor now getting tenure, liberal to conservative, is 23 to 1. So if we care about our kids or our grandkids, we need to start following Jesus again on the basics. Love God with our mind, prepare our kids for what's coming out of these ideologies centers, and that means understanding what it is. And I lay that out right here. And finally, on our website, you can go to our press and you can get resources. Not everyone needs to read a 300, 500 page book. We have the best Christian minds, the best PhDs in the country, writing booklets for us that are 25 pages each at the 11th grade reading level on all of the classical apologetic issues like the problems of science and faith, the reliability of the Bible, why does God allow evil, to now the cultural apologetic issues like race, class, sex, gender, ethnicity, and so forth. And here you have to have had lived experience if you're going to be an author of that particular booklet. So, our booklet on trans was written by a person who has a PhD and was formerly trans. The one on homosexuality, written by someone who right now has almost completed her PhD and is former lesbian. The booklet on Is Christianity a White Man's Religion, written by someone who has a doctorate and was black, and guess what? Is still black. Isn't that great? But all of these booklets are written by experts. They're concise, they're readable, and there is no excuse for parents or pastors that they don't have the time or the resources when we and other ministries have made this so easy, so concise. If you care about your kids, if you care about your congregation, if you care about your grandkids, start preparing for this. And even if not everybody is called to go back into the universities, which are most, perhaps, maybe support ministries like ours that are going back. Because if you don't change the university, you won't change the culture. We need to stop putting everything we have downstream into politics, like pouring chlorine into the cesspool downstream and being able to see the bottom for 15 seconds. Because at second 16, it's dirty again because of what's coming from upstream.
Thank you for coming on today. And where can people find out about you and get your book?
Yeah, an easy place to go. You can go to ratiochristi.org, but you can go to ratio, like mathematical ratio, dot link slash PMA for Progressive Miseducation America. Ratio.link slash PMA. Why? Because you can invite me to speak there to your churches, your campuses, your conferences. You can look at our RC Press booklets by clicking on a link there. You can read for free the first introduction and chapter of the book. And if you want to, you can link to Amazon, buy the book, get it on Audible if you'd rather listen. All things can be found right there, ratio.link slash PMA. If you've got students who want to join us or faculty, help us reclaim the universities, great. Tell people about us, let people know what's available on the campuses, or even start a Ratio Christi College prep in your church because we have a high school division as well.
And what would you like to leave my audience with today?
Pray. All the major revivals in the last 150 years, including the first and second Great Awakenings, including Asbury, Yale, and Azusa, including the Protestant Reformation. It wasn't Pastor Martin Luther. It was Dr. Luther, Professor Luther. Most of the revivals are connected to the college campuses. Pray for the works at the college campuses. As goes the university, so goes the world. As goes the U.S. university, so goes the world. It's that influential.